y'all. Welcome back to the Brighter Black Futures podcast. I'm your host, Bisa, and today I've got another great show on tap for all of you. And today I continue my focus on Black history. We'll have another extended, longer Black History Moment segment. And today's focus will be all about young people who've made some great change. So people under 25 in the Black community who are history makers or change makers in the present that I believe that you should know about. So without further ado, let's get into it. And now it's time for the upliftment segment of the show. This is a segment where I share a quote that really resonates with me, speaks to me, uplifts me, and also ties into the theme of the show for today. So today's quote comes from Nelson Mandela, and it is, "The future belongs to our youth. As some of us near the end of our political careers, younger people must take over. They must seek and cherish the most basic condition for peace, namely unity in our diversity, and find lasting ways to that goal." So I think this quote is really beautiful because, of course, it talks about the future and the fact that as older people step down who did great things, younger people must fill their space. And I think it also speaks to the idea of fostering that in the youth by making sure they're able to take their place and do so well. And, of course, the whole bit about peace and recognizing that there's so many of us on this planet, we can be unified and also embrace our many differences and move forward together. So this quote, I think, really ties into the show's theme because it's focused on youth and, of course, a lot of the work that people who are activists or in the political arena do. And I'm going to touch on a lot of people who are doing great things, the young people who have done great things and continue to do great things for their communities and beyond. So on to the next segment. Now it's time for the Black History Moment segment, a longer segment today that's going to focus on amazing youth in our community from around the world. And the first person I want to tell you about is the late, great Nkosi Johnson. Now, Nkosi Johnson hailed from South Africa, and he was a famous HIV/AIDS child activist who was born with HIV. His mother, Daphne, had HIV, and he was born with it as a result of her condition. Now, Nkosi was born on February 4th, 1989, to his mother, Daphne, who was HIV positive, and as a result, he ended up getting the disease himself, which made him, at the time, one of the 70,000 children each year who were born HIV positive in South Africa. But of course, Nkosi was a fighter. He survived beyond his second birthday, which is almost unheard of, or was almost unheard of at the time. Very unusual for HIV babies to make it that far in age, but he made it past 2 years old. And as the disease took toll on his mother, a greater toll on his mother as he grew up, she and Nkosi were admitted to an AIDS care center in Johannesburg. It was there that Nkosi met his future foster mom. Her name was Gail Johnson, a volunteer at the center, and she had immediate connection to this mother and child because she herself, her family, had been impacted by the loss of a family member due to HIV/AIDS. Over time, as the depth of their connection grew, Daphne and Gail decided that Nkosi would become the foster child of Gail, and Gail would take him to her home so he could have as normal a childhood as possible. A few years later, in 1997, Daphne, Nkosi's mother, passed away from AIDS-related complications, and that same year, Gail decided to try to enroll Nkosi in school for the first time. Unfortunately, because of his condition, which he had to let the school know, there was pushback. 50% of the people at the school, teachers, students, parents, said yes, and another 50% said no. However, because of Gail's loud and persistent campaigning, including taking her story to the media to make it public and spread the word, Nkosi was eventually enrolled in a school in a suburb of Johannesburg called Melville, and legislation was changed to ensure that any child living with HIV/AIDS could not be discriminated against and would be allowed to attend school with other children. After Gail's success in getting Nkosi in school, he became a national figure in the campaign to destigmatize HIV/AIDS in South Africa, with provincial education departments across the country moving to draw up new policies. Nkosi rose to international prominence in July of 2000 when he delivered a self-written address which was televised worldwide to 10,000 delegates at the 13th International AIDS Conference in Durban. Nkosi at the time was only 11 years old, and he was a tiny figure in a shiny dark suit and sneakers, but he held his audience of 10,000's attention and often had them in tears throughout his address as he told his story. For the closing of his speech, he said, "Care for us and accept us We are all human beings. We are normal. We have hands, we have feet, we can walk, we can talk, we have needs just like everyone else. Don't be afraid of us. We are all the same. Powerful message. In October 2000, he took the same message to an HIV/AIDS conference in Atlanta, Georgia. And soon after coming home from that trip, his health condition started to worsen. Shortly after Christmas, Nkosi was diagnosed with brain damage, and he had several seizures and became semi-comatose. But still, he hung on. Nkosi ended up passing away at 5:40 a.m. on Friday, June 1st of 2001. And at the time of his death, he was the longest surviving child born with HIV/AIDS in South Africa. After his passing, he was given a hero's burial in Johannesburg and a funeral attended by thousands of mourners, and his story galvanized HIV/AIDS awareness campaigners across the country and the world. Nkosi was posthumously awarded the first ever Kids' Rights Foundation's International Children's Peace Prize in Rome in November 2001, an award that was created in his honor, a great tribute for a young boy, for his efforts in support of the rights of children everywhere with HIV/AIDS. Also, his legacy continues to live on through Nkosi's Haven, which houses and supports HIV-positive mothers and children, and also supports projects in which people living with HIV/AIDS in South Africa are given care and employment in communal environments. And that is the story of the little but very powerful Nkosi Johnson, who had a short life and did so much with it to change the world for the better for others. Now, the second person I'd like to tell you about is a young girl by the name of Havana Chapman-Edwards. Now, Havana Chapman-Edwards, who's also known as the Tiny Diplomat on her socials, is a 13-year-old girl who is a passionate community organizer, philanthropist, public speaker, and humanitarian, as well as an actor and model. She was born in Cairo, Egypt, to her parents, one of whom was a writer, the other was a U.S. diplomat, and Havana has lived in 6 countries and visited over 30 in her short lifetime. In her travels, she has seen firsthand that girls in many countries do not have the same opportunities that she does. So, because of that, she decided to take action. She became the founder and executive director of Girls Have Rights, a youth-powered organization dedicated to providing human rights and equal access to education for girls all around the world. According to Havana, the reason she started her non-for-profit was, in her own words, to help little brown girls like me fight for their dreams, and those dreams start with an education. Havana was also recognized by the International Literary Association for her work in promoting literacy representation after she learned via a scholastic report that Black children on average have 37 fewer books in their homes than all children combined. For Havana, representation in all forms has always been important. She attended the Kidlit rally for Black Lives in Washington, D.C., and read a poem she wrote with her father that centered on advocating against global racism. The poem was called "We the Kids Need Answers." But literacy for girls isn't the only cause Havana has used her voice to advocate for. On the National School Walkout Day Against Gun Violence in 2018, Havana was the only person in her Alexandria, Virginia elementary school to join the protest. During the walkout, Havana sported a bright orange astronaut suit, a suit that represents her dreams of one day becoming an astronaut. Inspired by icons like Mae Jemison and Leland Melvin, Havana said, "I want to reach for the stars and not allow anyone to stop me from reaching my dreams." Due to her many accomplishments, Havana has been recognized as a leader in many ways. She was asked to be on and is on the Youth Executive Board of Dreams for Kids, a Chicago-based nonprofit focused on replacing charity with opportunity, and she also serves on the Advisory Council for Girls Who Code. She has been a keynote speaker for national events including the National School Walkout, National Die-In, and Fridays for the Future, United States Climate Strike, Shattering the Silence. In fall 2019, Havana was invited to speak about her advocacy for girls' education both at the International High-Level Conference on Educating for the Rule of Law at the United Nations in Vienna, Austria, and the OSCE Human Dimension Implementation Meeting in Warsaw, Poland. Poland. Accolades for her activism and nonprofit work include being featured on CNN, NBC's Little Big Shots, Season 4, Episode 11, and being featured on the cover of Time magazine for her gun violence prevention advocacy. Havana was also honored as one of Teen Vogue's 21 Under 21 class of 2018 for her advocacy for human rights for girls around the world. She was also given the Distinction of Hope Award in 2018 from the AME denomination for community service in the African American community. And she was also honored by the Today Show as one of the 18 Under 18 groundbreakers in 2019. With all those accolades and her many accomplishments, it's clear that Havana is a force to be reckoned with and that she'll be making change for the better in society and around the world for years to come. To learn more about her, check her out on her socials at The Time, The Diplomat. Now, the next person I want to tell you about is Nia Faith Betty, who was born on October 6, 2021. She's a Canadian activist, fashion designer, and the co-founder of a brand called Revolutionnaire, a digital social network for changemakers, and a clothing line that celebrates diversity. Now, Betty grew up in the professional ballet world and was considered a prodigy. She moved to the United States to train at New York City's Joffrey Ballet School at the age of 14. During her time at Joffrey, Betty was featured in Awesomeness TV's Joffrey Elite. 2 years later, in 2017, Betty suffered from a nearly career-ending injury that left her on bed rest for several months. During her time in bed, resting from her injury, Betty began sketching and designing a dancewear line catering to dancers of color, inspired by her own journey of growing up as a black ballerina and never having access to apparel that matched her skin tone and having to dye her dancewear for the majority of her career. When Betty met Misty Copeland in 2014 and learned that Copeland also dyed her apparel and accessories due to lack of diversity in dancewear, Betty became inspired to create her own line. Betty went on to attend Howard University at the age of 17 in 2019, and while there, she launched her line, Revolutionnaire, with a line of branded t-shirts, which later expanded into Canada's first ever skin tone dancewear and accessories for people of color. In the summer of 2020, Betty entered a unique partnership with the Canadian heritage brand Roots, which included a two-part collaboration between Roots and Revolutionnaire. The first phase of the collaboration launched on February 5th, 2021, with Betty's sister, Justice Faith Betty, being announced as the co-founder of the company the same week. The collaboration featured a t-shirt with the phrase "Dreams Fuel Revolutions" on it and sold out in under 24 hours. Proceeds from the collection were donated to Canada's Black Academy to amplify young Black talent across the country. The second collaboration launched on October 19, 2021, with a leather jacket, leather bag, 2 statement t-shirts, and 6 co-branded hoodies and sweatpants. In the midst of all this, Betty decided to add a social justice arm to Revolutionnaire and create an online social network for activists. After onboarding a team of over 30 young North American activists, the sisters and their team worked to build a dedicated platform for young people to learn about causes of interest, connect with like-minded citizens, and take action on social causes. Since launching in June of 2021, the social network has gained members from Ghana, Uganda, Mexico, Turkey, Jordan, Canada, and the United States. As with Havana Chapman-Edwards, Nia Faith Betty is a force to be reckoned with, a young person on a mission. And if you'd like to learn more about her, please visit her website, which is www.revolutionnaire. Now, the last person I want to tell you about is a young woman by the name of Dominique Palmer. She is a fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts. She was born on October 7th, 1999, and is a British climate justice activist and student at Brigham University who grew up in London. Dominique is now one of the UK's leading environmentalists. However, she began her activism as a youth activist in the School Strike for Climate movement and first spoke at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in 2019. During the COVID pandemic, she participated in the hashtag Climate Strike Online. Now, in her activism, Palmer focuses on intersectionality and marginalized communities, as well as diversity in the environmental movement, stating that she wants to tackle the systemic inequality in climate change. She also points out that the race to safeguard the future of this planet has begun, and so we must act now. We are not only fighting for our futures, but against the present crisis and those already suffering. We need ambitious systemic change that places people and the planet at the heart of it. These ideas have driven her to push for changes to legislation, and as a result, she has successfully lobbied MPs to pass the Well-Being of Future Generations Bill. This act provides for better decision making by ensuring that public bodies take account for the long term, help to prevent problems occurring or getting worse, take an integrated approach, and consider and involve people of all ages and diversity. As an internationally recognized climate activist, Palmer has appeared on panel discussions in international conferences like the United Nations Climate Change Conference alongside Malala, Emma Watson, and Greta Thunberg, and stated that the exploitation of natural resources and people are linked. In her activism, she also focuses on utilizing music and the arts to bring awareness to climate change. She was an organizer for Climate Live, which took place in 2021 and featured Declan McKenna playing in front of the Houses of Parliament to bring awareness to the climate crisis. Palmer also recorded a song for Earth Day with Titio and hosted Billie Eilish's Overheated event. Palmer was also part of organizing the UK's first Black Ecofeminist Summit and was one of 12 Fridays for Future organizers who wrote open letters for the initiative, pressuring the CEO to stop fueling the climate crisis. Palmer also focuses on eco-anxiety in young people related to climate change, acknowledging that there is a lot of fear about the future in her generation and that young people, myself included, feel betrayed by world leaders. Additionally, leaning into her international focus on climate change, Palmer penned an open letter to President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, informing them that our present and future depend on the actions your government takes within the next 4 years. In recognition for her contributions, Dominique Palmer has been featured in the Forbes 100 UK environmentalist lists, and I'm sure she will be on many more lists in the future. So be sure to also check out Dominique Palmer on her socials to learn more about her as well. All right, we're at the end of today's shows. I hope you enjoyed this extended Black History moment segment and that you learned a lot about some young people in the past and in the present who are doing great things to create awesome changes and make the world a better place for us all. Till next time, take care of you and be well. Bye.